A very good evening to one and all. I'm Yorani, your host for the day. We are honored to be gathered here today in celebration of Engineers Day, and I would like to wish you the same. We celebrate Engineers Day in India as a tribute to the greatest Indian engineer, Sir M. Vishweshwaraya. The government of India awarded him Bharat Ratna in 1955 for his work in the fields of engineering and education. He was also awarded the British knighthood by King George V for his outstanding contribution, which put the honorific Sir before his name. On behalf of ICE Women in Engineering, I welcome you all to this event. Please bear with us and apologies in case if there is any technical issues. And in case if I drop out, then Devasena will take up the hosting. Uh, we will open the forum for questions from audience at the end of the presentation. And please note to avoid any disturbances, the microphones of all the participants will be muted. You may raise any queries that you have through the chat window. The event will be recorded and will be made available on YouTube channels in some days. So on that note, I will touch upon the agenda for the day. I'll give an introduction to Women in Engineering initiatives, our vision and goals, and Geeta will be speaking about diversity and inclusion. And I'll give an introduction to Dr. Barnali, and then Dr. Barnali will give the presentation on seismic engineer can never stand still, gender bias and global experience, followed by a question and answer session. And then I'll give an introduction to logo competition judges, and then Mr. Amit Sharma will be announcing the logo competition winners. And then we will have the vote of thanks. I would like to open the event by throwing some light on women in engineering initiatives. Our vision statement is to enhance gender diversity by fostering collaboration and inclusiveness to shape an equitable and sustainable civil engineering industry. We have these four initiatives providing avenues for people to discuss and share their experience. We are looking forward to organizing various events in the future, similar to today's event. We are planning to have an event in November. Please follow us on social media to get more updates. Creating awareness regarding the profession. We are sharing posts regarding women achievers and professionals on different social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. We have already paved the way for recognizing women professionals practicing in the industry. One such activity is organized every Wednesday, which is dedicated to women contribution towards engineering in India, called Wonder Woman in India. We have similar activities such as Memo Day, Monday, Fascinating Friday, and Sunday Spur. Networking with various educational institutions and inspiring the civil engineering graduates to continue in the profession. We have identified several colleges for initiating the student chapter. We are intending to identify mentors and mentees and match them for continuous support. I would like to welcome you all to be part of the upcoming events and continue to follow us on social media platform. We have many enthusiastic volunteers from various regions like Mumbai, Bangalore, Kolkata, Delhi, and Chennai who have put in their continuous efforts. We have volunteers ranging from students to fellows of ICE. ICE has provided us a common platform to support women engineers and thereby meeting the goals and objectives of women in engineering. With that note, I would like to introduce you to Geeta Ramurthy. Geeta Ramurthy is a chartered accountant and holds an MIT Sloan certificate on digital transformation platform strategies for success. She has a passion for learning how technology can drive business transformation and growth. Having worked in manufacturing, financial services, and professional services sectors in multiple capacities, Geeta has a diverse experience of leading finance, operations, and business in India and overseas. She has played a lead role in helping Atkins win a special commendation award at the Institution of Directors Golden Peacock Award for Occupational Health and Safety in 2014. She is leading digital services in India and spearheading delivery of Atkins' strategy around harnessing data and technology for the next phase of evolution and growth of the business. She is a strong advocate of diversity and inclusion at workplace and takes extra interest in mentoring colleagues to help them evolve as confident and inclusive leaders. Now, I would request Geeta Ramurthy, Operations Director Atkins, to speak a few lines on diversity and inclusion.
Thank you, Yuvrani, for that very nice introduction. Thank you. I would like to first of all extend my thanks to the Steering Committee of Women in Engineering, ICE, for this excellent opportunity for me to speak about diversity and inclusion in this event. So I'd like to talk about diversity and inclusion from three different perspectives. The first one is really about what impact it has in the corporate world, which I think quite a bit has been written about that over years. But it is important to kind of look at the statistics for us to understand whether the needle has moved. And internationally, a variety of studies and research has been conducted. And one of the such studies was conducted by Credit Suisse, where they interviewed 30,000 senior executives across 3,000 companies. And what they found out was the share price performance of the companies that ranked the top 20 in terms of the diversity and inclusion metrics actually outperformed the ones that had 15% or less women representation. So the ones that actually had 20% or more representation of women in senior leadership positions actually made a huge impact in terms of the share price performance. But look at India. I mean, if you come back to India, again, here, Zinov is another management consultant that did a study. And what they found in 2019 was that when they analyzed 60 companies in the global capability center space or the global business center space, startups and other multinationals, what they found out was that generally the representation of women in India is about 30 to 31% at a corporate level. And in senior leadership positions, it actually drops to about 10%. Though it is a little better in the mid and junior levels in mid 20s to 30. What I think they also noted is that in non-technical positions, the representation is slightly higher. It's about 31%. And in technical positions, it's about 25%. So keeping statistics apart, what does this mean, for us? From a society perspective as well, the more a country has its women empowered and educated and contributing to the GDP, the more the impact is on the overall well-being of the country and the economy itself. So one of the analysis actually done in US actually pointed out to the fact that this was actually at a global level. What they said was, if you actually give opportunities to women across the globe, by 2025 we would see an additional GDP of about $8 trillion. So this is massive, which is untapped. And if we have to start moving the needle, we need to do that very rapidly because we've been talking about this for many years and the needle is moving a little slowly. So for me, another thing that I want to talk about is it's not just about numbers, but it's really about driving the right behaviors right from homes. Where parents have to start to realize that both the boys and girls have to look at, have to be seen in a similar manner. They have to be given equal opportunities. The kind of professions they encourage to get into should be the same. And therefore it starts at home. And then, it actually percolates to the society as well. So what are we doing in Atkins about diversity and inclusion? We realized the need for, improving the gender diversity to begin with quite a few years back. And consciously what we've been doing is a range of things. Starting from, identifying the talent that we have within the business. How can we give them the right opportunities to, make sure that they are not sort of, caught up in the wrangles around whether they can travel, whether they can, whether they need to work from home. So all of that, we thought were actually holding women back. So what we did was to introduce some flexible policies in terms of working hours. We also said that, they could take extended maternity leave, and typically people tend to fall into that difficult situation where they, end up having kids in the initial phase. They struggle to resume their work immediately, and sometimes this has a bearing on the professional growth as well. So we started supporting them on that front. So extended maternity leave. We also do a few other things like identifying mentors within the business, whether it's male or female mentors, to actually help provide the right opportunities to our women colleagues, because there is an unconscious bias. Let's face it, we all realize that that is still there, and it will take some time for us to overcome that. And apart from that, what we also do is to really celebrate successes a bit more loudly, because given the fact that especially in the mid and senior level positions, the percentage of women is lower, the opportunities for them to really excel are not as many as they could be. So we really try and celebrate the ambassadors of gender diversity as well. So I'm happy to play a role in furthering gender diversity and actually diversity and inclusion at a broader level in our company. And I really think we still have some way to go, but there is a lot of potential for us to improve on that front. On that note, I would hand back to you, Yovrani. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Geeta. Those were really useful. We have a lot of things to take away from the your words. And before I hand over this to Dr. Barnali, I would request Meenal to launch the first poll question.
Hi, we are putting 30 seconds for this. Hi, we see 1965, a lot of people think, but the correct answer is 1968. Thank you.
Thank you, Meenal, for that. So, thank you, Meenal. Now, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Barnali. Dr. Barnali Ghosh is a technical principal at Mott MacDonald, London, and a fellow of ICE. She is a chartered civil engineer with specialization in earthquake geotechnical engineering through her PhD at Cambridge University. She is a visiting professor at Cambridge University through a Royal Academy fellowship. During her career, she acted as a seismic designer and reviewer for high-profile projects around the world. Dr. Ghosh is passionate about increasing the representation of women in engineering and has featured in the Financial Times its top 30 future industry leaders from Bain community in 2017 and shortlisted for the British National Diversity Award for Gender in 2017. She is a committee member of ADVANCE, the Network for Inclusion and Diversity and Women in Mott MacDonald, a role model and a mentor for women engineers within the company, and panel member of ICE Diversity Committee Southeast. She is currently acting as the lead mentor for business in communities, BEAM, cross-organization mentoring circles program for Mott MacDonald. Let's open the forum for an interesting discussion on the topic Seismic Engineer Can Never Stand Still, Gender Bias and Global Experience by Dr. Barnali. Dr. Barnali, over to you.
Thank you very much for the lovely introduction. I think I resonate with a lot of things that Geeta said earlier. I'm going to try and share my screen and hopefully technology will work. Okay. If everybody can see my screen, just somebody just tell me that you can see my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I think one of the good things that has happened due to COVID has been that we're doing a lot more of these events, and virtually the whole world has come to one place. So it does not matter. So members of the committee found me via LinkedIn, and that's how I am here today talking to you. So I did choose a very provocative title, which was, "Why does a seismic engineer never stand still?" I mean, I would say rather, most of us who are engineers, we never stand still, because at one time, an engineer is almost like they have to do a million things. We have to plan, design, execute, and also look at the delivery of our projects. So I'm going to just, because I have short time, I'm going to just give you some snippets of some technical delivery that have been done, which I think will be useful to you. We can, of course, have longer discussions about them. I am actually, when trying to look through, I was ashamed to admit that I really did not know much about our great engineer for whom we celebrate Engineers Day. And I was wondering, I always saw this picture when I was doing engineering in India, but did not really. So while preparing for this lecture, I kind of looked back at some of the things that he had done, and I was amazed. And I wondered why, when I was doing engineering, I did not know more about what a prolific civil engineer he was and what a fantastic role model. So one of the things that I feel that we need to know more about are these successful engineers and their stories, so that we feel inspired by what they have done. So this is and also, why do I say that the seismic engineer's world is never still? This is actually a plot which I have taken from Munich Re, which plots all the global hazards. So what you see here is the global hazards from 1980 to 2018. Interesting to note here, for the people as civil engineers, we have a role in climate change. If you look at the top bar, the climate change events, which are in orange, seems to be increasing with time. Whereas if you look at the ones which are in green, are hydrological events, which are floods, which are also increasing with time. And finally, if you come to the last bottom, which is in maroon, are the geophysical events, which includes earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic activity. So a seismic engineer cannot stand still, because these events are happening with regular intervals. So it keeps us in our toes. So that is from where the context of the title comes in. I assume I'm speaking to civil engineers today, and I just wanted to kind of throw a challenge to you that recently the UK government has thrown some challenges for the construction industry. And one of the challenges in the construction industry is that by the year 2025, we have to lower costs by 33%. We have to go for faster delivery, which is where being digital comes also important. Obviously, we have a role in the environment, so we have to lower the emissions by 50% and improvement in exports. So all of these targets are the challenges which future civil engineers will face. And as we make our way through these challenges, innovation will be required. And this is where we need to tap in to that workforce of women engineers, as well as we all have a role to contribute. So what am I going to be talking about? I'm going to give you some context, which I've already done. I'm going to show you an example of a project where just not being an engineer, but how a wider context of engineering can help society. I'm going to talk a bit about some challenges and opportunities. I should mention here that all the thoughts here are my own thoughts. I do not represent Mott MacDonald's thoughts, but from my experience in the engineering sector for more than 20 years, these are my thoughts. And then I will leave you with some final thoughts and some question answers. What do I do, and what is the motivation for this? Obviously, my motivation for doing this has always been to help to design a safer, sustainable, resilient world. And it came up from my childhood, which was in Bihar, where I saw severe floods, and being affected by the floods kind of made me trigger a desire to help to define a better world, a more resilient infrastructure. My daily world is full of these images of things always falling down, buildings cracking. And that is my engineering is the tools that I use in order to prevent this as much as possible. The question I often get asked is, how did I get here? So my first degree, as I mentioned, was a civil engineering degree from India. And I did a further specialization from geotechnical engineering, which is obviously anything below the ground. So my specialization is essentially earthquake geotechnical engineering. I was lucky that I got a scholarship from Cambridge, and I followed it up by a PhD from Cambridge University in earthquake geotechnical engineering. And I became a chartered member of ICE in 2009. And I used the COVID situation to apply for my fellowship, and I became a fellow in 2020. So that is how I got there. I have always been working in the industry since the point I started my career. Now I just want to ask you a simple question. What do you want to see after an earthquake for your building? There are two examples here. So you see how I get disturbed even when I am giving a talk. Sorry. So how do you want your building to behave in an earthquake? So there are two examples here. One of this is from the Sichuan earthquake in 2008. This was a fairly strong earthquake. Nothing happened to the building. You can say it's standing. So which means that it's a well-designed building and all the principles of earthquake engineering has been taken into account. Whereas on the other side, we have typical pictures which we see where such examples of good behavior cannot be seen. But the next comes the question, how do you want your ground or foundation to behave? This is a famous example after the Kobe earthquake, and what you are seeing are the piles. What happened was these piles all snapped up. So you definitely don't want this behavior. As geotechnical engineers, we want that our foundation, if the damage has to occur, the damage should occur in the superstructure because it is easier to repair a superstructure. Whereas if you come to a substructure like a foundation, we want minimum damage to occur. And this is the basic principle. And so as geotechnical engineers, we have an even bigger role in ensuring that our foundations, our structures, they behave in the best way possible in seismic conditions. Just trying to think about the various geotechnical hazards that can happen for an earthquake. After an earthquake, we often hear a case of liquefaction where the ground kind of just behaves like a jelly, loses all its strengths. You can be left with these kinds of when the fault ruptures, big fault ruptures, lateral spreading, landslides, and all the dirty things that can happen. The best one is this kind where a structural engineer can be quite happy that the building has behaved well. But for a geotechnical engineer, this is a disaster because you've had liquefaction induced and failures. So there are lots of dirty things that can happen. So my specialization, and I'm trying to talk about some of the global experience, because I provide very specialist technical advice, I'm often called to be a reviewer in very, very high profile projects all over the world. The pictures that I'm showing you is from my travels in China and also my travels all along the globe. And this global experience has given me an understanding of how seismic is also a combination of local and global experience, because the solutions that you would like for a country, developing country, is not the same as the solutions that we would have in a developed country. And this is a very important distinction. So I always mention that we should respect local knowledge when we are trying to provide solution. And our solution should be in harmony with the environment. So I work in Mott MacDonald, which is a global consultancy services. We have offices all over the world and particularly offices in India as well. And we work in different sectors. So the advantage for me that we work in different sectors is because seismic is present in all the different sectors. So it can be buildings, communications, power, education, and in all of these sectors we have seismic. So that allows me to get involved in different interesting, and it keeps my daily life very interesting. The project that I'm going to talk about specifically today is a project which is very close to my heart, because it is a project to me which shows that if you do good engineering, you can change the life of a wide number of people. So this project is called as the Dhaka Environmentally Sustainable Water Project. Now, if you understand, if you know about Dhaka is our neighbor, Bangladesh, the purpose of this project is to provide clean, sustainable water to about 3 million people in Dhaka. Now, why do we choose Dhaka? Because Dhaka has an estimated population of about 15 million, and it is forecast to grow about 29 million by 2035. And there are some tube wells there, but because people have been drilling so fast, the water source is depleting. And that is why, and the nearby, most of the currently the water supply in Dhaka is through this river in blue, which is called as the Shitalakya River. Most of this is through this, but this river has become completely polluted, and so it cannot supply fresh water. So this scheme, this scheme starts from taking water from a source, which is the Meghna River, which is about 40 kilometers from Dhaka city, by building a intake treatment plant there. And then water taken from this is pumped through twin water pipes, about 22 kilometers diameter twin water pipes. These are the raw water into a treatment plant, which is the Gandharpur treatment plant. From there, the water is treated, and this treated water is then further passed on through primary and distributed tributaries. So we have two further pipelines, 1.6 meter diameter pipelines, 14 kilometers of pipeline running through very congested areas in Dhaka. Some of the pipelines are underground, and they would feed water to about 3 million people in the city. And the scheme is about changing lives. And there's a small video I have here, which I'm going to play now, hopefully. So this talks about how do you provide clean water for 4 million people. This is how it was done. As I said, Dhaka is one of the largest cities in the world, and it's running out of drinking water due to rapid urbanization. I can see similar scenarios in India as well, what happened in Chennai recently. And water from river by rivers is untreatable because pollution levels are so high. So if you look at this sustainable, if you want to sustain the city, a sustainable source of potable water is needed to supply the population forecast to grow by 20 billion. So the Dhaka Environmental Project, here what we have tunnels below which water is treated. A new treatment plant will supply clean water from Meghna River to 4 million people through a 40-kilometer twin transmission pipelines and feeder pipelines. And obviously, sustainability is at the core of the project, with only 0.25% of the water which will be extracted, safeguarding fisheries. Now, you can imagine as an engineer what a difficult task it is to route pipelines to such densely populated place. In order to help us to collect data, we used a drone, so that the data could be much more simplified. And this is where my role comes in. I designed ground improvements to protect the pipeline and main structures from earthquake. Now, generally, people will say Dhaka is mildly seismic, okay? So Dhaka is not really 0.2 G for people who are interested in the Dhaka building code. But what is the problem is the type of soil that you have from which the pipeline is passing through. The pipeline, the soils could have a possibility of liquefaction. So so the question that brings in, what is liquefaction? As I mentioned earlier, liquefaction is the shaking of soil in an earthquake. It makes the soil, there are plenty of pictures. If you type liquefaction in Google, you will see lots of pictures. And soil in this state of liquefaction has zero strength and stiffness, and everything. You can see the manhole popping up. So that's how bad liquefaction. This is an example from the New Zealand earthquake, where you could see what happened to your car, which you had parked in, but after the earthquake, that's what happened to your car. So, well, this is just trying to explain liquefaction to people who have not really thought about it, or they are not even aware that this can happen. So what increases the likelihood of liquefaction? Pretty simple. If your soil becomes from dense soil, you're moving towards loose soil, then the chances of liquefaction increases. So basically, if you have loose, wet sands and sandy silts, Now, sandy silts are really the most high-risk soils. So what did we do? I mean, it's a big project. There was a huge number of people who worked. We started working on this project from 2016, and this project has been funded by the ADB. The project will be completed in 2025, but what we did was throughout the route, we had a site investigation. From the site investigation, we looked at the liquefaction potential, and as a result of that, we designed some ground improvements, which are stone compaction piling, SCP piling along the route. So the idea is that if there is an earthquake event, the pipeline will be protected because the pipeline falls under essential services. So the pipeline is protected. So this kind of engineering has a role that it affects what happens to the people who will have 24 hours sustainable water supply after an earthquake event. But obviously, you cannot do all of this remotely. So that is why I say it's a global experience, because I did go to Bangladesh. And as part of a geotechnical engineer, what you see in my hand there is some of the soil, the local soil. And people will recognize it. It's a sand, but it has a silt percentage. And it's the silty content, which is with the fine fragments, which is not really very well characterized in case histories. Everybody knows that sands liquefy, but there are some silts which also liquefy. And in order to understand this kind of liquefaction, you have to do a detailed analysis. So here you can see me looking proudly at all the pictures of the soil samples that we have collected. And what you see on the other side in the plot is examples where we were doing microtremor testing. So we worked with the local universities, local engineers, and observing and collecting data. For us, because we had part of this is through tunnels, which are about 15 to 20 meters below the river Chitalaka. And in order to do some ground investigation below the tunnels, you can see me with my colleague Lucy, where we were in a ship, we were in a kind of boat trying to do site investigation in the river, which is something which had not been done in Bangladesh, in that part of the world. So that was also quite challenging. But what I want to mention here is that the opportunities are endless, but you do have to, as engineers, we do have to understand our sites where we are working. Some of the other locations which I have worked on is Pakistan. I know there are many people in Pakistan, they were considering building the highest dam in the world, the Dam Basha Dam, which is 235-meter roller concrete dam. So we were looking at all the tender reviews and documents for that design. So this was, again, if you talk about gender bias or other things, for this picture that you see that was taken in Istanbul, I was like the only woman in that entire room full of all the different, for such a high dam, you can imagine how many stakeholders were there. But what comes out across these is your technical knowledge. If you know what you're talking about, I do not certainly think that gender plays any role there. What people want is good technical advice from you. I'm now going to just touch slightly, I'm just going to touch slightly with gender bias and talk a little bit about why we want to encourage more women into engineering and to show them that in this as a career has often attractive options for them. One of the biggest examples, as I travel widely for projects all over the world, one of the biggest examples for this came to me. This photograph is from when I was in Japan. And in Japan, I was supporting an offshore wind farm investigation, the first offshore wind farm in Japan. And I was in a room where I was the only female, and my role was to convince that in Japan, traditionally people use SPT, standard penetration testing. That is what they use. They are not very comfortable with CPTs. So I was trying to explain that in Europe, whenever we have an offshore wind farm, we often use CPTs. But when I went there, during the whole day, I tried to explain why we should be using cone penetration testing for investigation. And the room, it didn't seem to matter at all. Nobody was interested. People did not really want to do CPTs. So I thought maybe my visit was really useless. But by the end, there was a professor in the room, an old professor, who had been in Europe at some point in his life. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh yes, I know CPT, it is good. Let's do it." So you would not believe, in this room of about 30 people, once the person who has authority said yes, the whole room said yes. So for me, this story is always very, very important to say that it's not really, it doesn't matter if, if a few people do not believe you. You must have your conviction and believe in what you are doing. The other thing I want to reach, I think I saw some of this in your initial idea. This is all the women who have passed out from Trinity, from the first batch. So we had a get-to. But what is important is that we need our all networks. So women engineers, we need our networks, and we all need to reach out to others, because once we reach out to others, it is useful as more and more women come into this and we talk about our own success stories. We should not underestimate our networks. So events like this are extremely, extremely useful. I mentioned about role models. It's important. The picture on the left is when I was in Dhaka, and these young girls, they were like, they had never seen. For them, seeing a woman in the site attire in their streets in Dhaka was kind of really a wonder for them. So I got asked the question, what do you do? And how can I wear the same clothes? To me, this is a very important role of a role model, to encourage the next generation of women to take engineering as a profession. And that is why senior women like us who have been on this profession for 15 to 20 years need to be there. And that is, we do this on a totally company-wide profiles, outside the company, everywhere, to encourage more women to go into engineering. And finally, I would like to kind of talk about just my three key messages to everyone listening to me. Take risk, because what I have learned, if you do not take risk, if you are not innovative, you will very soon stop being relevant. If you are doing the same thing again and again without taking any risks, then the path is pretty much a steady slope for you. As we engineers understand, the slope reaches a constant peak. So it's good, it may work for someone, but for some of us who want more challenges, you have to take risks. You have to be innovative in your solution and think of engineering as a profession, which ultimately gives us much more than any other profession, in my opinion, because we leave back bricks and mortars, which are, there for generations to come. So be a good engineer. We talked about this thing about a mentor. The role of a mentor in your career professional development cannot be underestimated, because I think when we have a good mentor, they can guide you. And so everybody really should have a person who acts as their mentor. Seek out mentors, speak to them. And I would like in India to see more women engineers and their profiles being shouted in the media, to make sure that they are visible role models. Like Sudha Murthy, until I knew, I wasn't even aware that she was the first woman who worked for her company. But there are so many of these stories which need to be out. Shout about them, create these stories so that more and more people know about us. And finally, my message to all of you is, it's just fear. Fear is what holds us from going and exploring engineering. If you imagine, I don't swim, but I was asked to jump from a cliff as part of an adventure sports. So you can see my picture is completely scared of this. But once we let go of our fear, then the wonderful world of engineering awaits us. And I wish all of you a happy engineering day. And I hope you found some interesting facts in this. There is lot more technical details to talk about, but due to the limited time, I've tried to keep it more general, but I'm available in LinkedIn for if you want any further discussion or anything. I'm happy to take some questions. Thank you. I will now stop sharing.
Yeah, thanks, Barnali. It was really inspiring, and I also got so much inspired from your presentation. Thank you so much.
I hope I was on time.
Yes. Yes, Dr. Barnali, you are. And I have a few questions for you. Before I take up some questions from the chat window, I would like to ask you a few questions. Um, my first question would be like structural and geotechnical engineers are required to work in close coordination to develop foundation solutions, more so high seismic activity areas. Can you share some of the best practice you adopt on projects while working with architects and structural engineers?
The big example here is a project that I'm working in California at the moment. It will be one of the largest tunnel projects in the world. Okay, so but we are in the early stages of the project, and the architects are always changing the stations, layout, the tunnels, and we as structural and geotechnical engineers are following suit. But one of the things that we have realized in this project is an example of having all of us on the same page is so very important. The communication, that if something changes architecturally, how it affects, and being digital is always very, very useful here. As I think Geeta mentioned about the BIM, there is the BIM 360 model for the orientation. So we, every week, the structural engineers and geotechnical engineers in the project, we look at the BIM model and see the changes. So that's essentially, these digital tools are very good means of communication for us, and we can talk about these talk about the changes that happens. And I think there is, unless there is a good handshake between the structural and geotechnical engineers, any good soil structure interaction analysis or understanding cannot happen. So the structural engineers need to understand that soil is much more complicated than just a spring or a stiffness value. So I've spent almost half of my life trying to push through to explain that just don't ask a stiffness or a spring value from me. Try and understand the total behavior of soil in loading as well as unloading if you want to do a good design. So yes, definitely very good coordination. And one of the best things that I think in MOTS we have, in my foundation and geotechnics division, we have structural and geotechnical engineers sitting together. So we have, so that you can have better interactions.
Yeah, that's really absolutely correct. And I have a question. In India, every year we face huge amount of loss due to flood, and how geotechnical engineering can bring more sustainable, more viable flood defense solution.
So again, as I said, the two of the flood projects and what are the things that I'm now seeing, the World Bank is asking more for integration of all risk management, so which includes floods, seismic, as well as climate change. So how an integrated framework of can be developed, which can be used for all the three different type of hazards. So geotechnical engineers are essentially, the example that I will give you is a Boston barrier, which is a flood defense barrier that MOT has been worried. And geotechnical engineers have almost contributed 50 to 60% in the project by doing all the ground analysis, the barrier analysis, and all of that. So geotechnical engineers have, if you do not understand the ground, you cannot build anything effectively in it. That's my simple take on that. So definitely we need to understand that quite well.
Thanks, Dr. Barnali. And we have a question from the audience. This is from Ayan. I have a question to Dr. Ghosh. There is a mindset with ADB and others that water facility comes first and sewage system should follow. Just like as they are building huge water infrastructure for Dhaka. However, how logical it seems to pump in this huge amount of water in an urban area with rather less organized sewage system. Where would this water go after use? Would it not trigger waterborne diseases once commissioned without a proper sewage system? Just for reference, another colonial city, Calcutta, was provided with a water supply system in 1868, but its sewage system, contemporary with that of London, was built in 1858. And that is, it preceded the water facility by a solid 10 years.
So I think Ayan is my batchmate from Jadavpur University. And we've had many discussions about this. So essentially, I do agree with your point, Ayan. That's made you made it quite, because I did geotechnical engineering and Ayan did environmental engineering in Jadavpur. So yes, obviously it has to go hand in hand, which obviously the sewage pits also need to be thought about. Otherwise, yes, you're just solving one problem, but creating another problem. And this is true for many engineering things I can think of, where we do provide one solution, but in the end of the road is another problem that we've created. So obviously an integrated solution would be much more better. So I would probably bring it up in our meetings with ADB.
Yeah. Just one more question I would like to ask you, Dr. Barnali. Please throw some light on what benefits can a professional get by engaging with academic institutions?
Very, very good question. And as I said, I recently took this visiting professor's role with Cambridge University. Throughout my life, whenever I have tried to work on a problem and things have become really difficult, which as a practicing engineer, probably I thought maybe needed a little bit more time, a little bit more research, I have gone back in touch with academic contacts. So sometimes with all over the world, and asked them, have you looked at this problem? Is there a PhD student who can look at this, investigate? Because the more interaction that happens between the academic professionals as well as the practicing engineers, the better is the quality of projects that we deliver. Because sometimes I find academic research remains academic and does not happen much practical value for us. So in order to try and push that, this interaction is extremely important. And I would suggest, this is one of the things I saw in your first slide, where you had this interaction between the different between the academics is quite important. Seek out on the students. The practicing engineers should highlight that if I am designing a retaining wall and I have layered soil, there is no easy solution in seismic case for that. How do we do it? Bring out those problems. The academics are more than happy to solve and to put some research student on them.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Barnali. And I have just one final question, because we still have 2-3 minutes. And this is, what were the key challenges you overcame in your professional journey to reach this level?
I think the key challenge has always been, as I said, my background, I was from a very small town in Bihar. So I was, my perception, even within India was, when I first joined my master's, is, oh, you're coming from an engineering college in Bihar, it may not be that good. So that perception, the conscious bias was always there. So every time the key challenges has been, you cannot do it, you will not be able to crack this one. So that challenge is always there. But for me, every challenge I feel is an opportunity, because if I did not have those challenges, I would not have the drive. So every challenge is an opportunity for me. And I think having that kind of clear goal, aspirations, and I think as women, it's important for us to realize the support that we get from our families is very, very important. Because if I have seen many women careers not getting to the level because of lack of support from family. So that's quite useful to have that support from the family. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barnali. And that was really inspiring. And thanks for taking time out and sharing your valuable experience and insight. Thank you so much. Now we'll move on to the logo competition. And while we have started implementing various activities planned under the initiatives, we felt the need to have a logo that communicates and represents the vision of our initiatives. To this effect, we had launched a logo competition with engineering students engineering faculty and practicing engineers as participants. We had a very good response from various consultancies and colleges. Thanks to all the participants, I would like to mention here that the logo winner's logo for all the we will be using this logo for all our future communications. With that, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce and thank all the logo competition judges. We have Abhijit. Abhijit is a country director for structures team and project principal at Bureau Happold, India. He's a chartered structural engineer with over 23 years consulting experience in the civil and structural engineering field. He's a fellow of both ICE and iStructi. For the past 16 years, Abhijit worked in the UAE, where he worked on a variety of projects ranging from high-rise towers and complex structures to structures forensics and industrial buildings. He previously led a team of associates, design and site engineers and technicians at Rambol, where he was the head of structural engineering. Thank you, Abhijit, for your time. Now, I would like to introduce you to the next judge, Mr. Ajit. Ajit is Joint Vice President, North Zone for Stoop Consultants and is responsible for business in the North Zone. He is a chartered civil engineer and a fellow of ICE. With an experience of over 29 years in the industry, Ajit's career graph has spanned a multitude of roles, including leadership in some of the best global consultancies firms, including like Arup, TCS, Jacobs, Stantec, etc. He has handled large teams of up to 400 professionals and successfully developed and implemented business strategies. He has been involved in commercial, contractual, and risk management of complex programs, providing tactical and strategic leadership to manage a sustainable, profitable business. Thank you, Ajit, for your efforts. Um, Moving on to the next judge, Miss Vidya. Miss Vidya is currently in charge of Rambol Global Engineering and Design Center to deliver international projects in strongholds in Europe, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Sweden, and the UK, as well as support India for sectors of transportation, building, water, climate change, sustainability. Her specialization is urban transport and infrastructure sectors covering airport, roads, highways and bridges, metro rails, buildings, and municipal utilities. Thank you, Ms. Vidya, for being part of this initiative. We have Mr. Ayan. Ayan is an independent water and wastewater engineering professional with bachelor's and master's degree from India and a PhD in wastewater management from USA. He has more than 23 years of professional and research experience in Indian and overseas projects funded by national and international agencies in multicultural environment. His varied exposure in strategy formulation, investment planning, feasibility studies, master plans, resource optimization, review and assessment, detailed engineering design, and assessment management mainly pertains to municipal water system. He has worked with a range of national and international consulting firms in a variety of projects in Oman, Bangladesh, and Nepal. Ayan has over 25 international publications and a book to his credit. As a fellow of ICE, he volunteers as ICE Kolkata representative, as a CPR reviewer, and contributes to promote civil engineering at local and national levels. Thanks, Ayan. Uh, Thank you all for accepting our request, and thanks for your valuable time, which was put in judging the logo. Now, let's look at the logos from the participants. A big thanks to all the participants for your valuable time and effort. Now, we have a very special guest, Mr. Amit Sharma. Mr. Amit Sharma is the Managing Director of Tata Consulting Engineers Limited, India's largest Indian private sector engineering and project consultancy, providing concept to commissioning services from planning and consulting, design and detailed engineering to project management and safety. Amit's experience spans across design and engineering consulting with a focus on product development, project and plant engineering, and design and asset life cycle management. He has championed the creation and implementation of enabling governance, business models, change management, program management, and solutions. Amit strongly believes in leveraging people, process, and computer aided design and engineering digital tool sets to promote transformation and collaboration. He's a promoter of the next generation of lean thinking, innovation, agility, and optimization across the engineering and design value chain. Prior to Tata Consulting Engineers, Amit served as a resident director of Atkins India Private Limited, part of the global engineering and design firm WS Atkins PLC. In this role, he was responsible for the Global Design Center of Excellence and Atkins India business spanning across energy, rail, transportation, aerospace, water and environment, and infrastructure related engineering consulting. He started his professional career at Tata Motors before moving to the US, where he did his higher studies and worked with the Sapient Technologies in their collaborative technologies practice and led the creation of the product lifecycle management offering. Currently at TCE, Amit is working closely with the team to charter TCE's growth, scale, and evolution into an innovative and leading design and engineering consulting across selected sectors and international markets, leveraging its glorious 58 years of proven excellence and track record. Mr. Amit Sharma, we would like to hear your thoughts and advices for our future initiatives. Before you announce the logo competition winners, over to you, Mr. Amit Sharma.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the wonderful team at ICE, spearheading women in engineering. And of course, it was great to hear Geeta, whom I have known in the professional capacity while at Atkins. Very, very talented women in the industry. And of course, Dr. Ghosh, thank you very much for a wonderful session from your end. Well, before I get into the discussion, the announcement of awards that have been requested, and I thank you all for coming up with this innovative idea of designing a logo. I want to briefly touch upon two things. One is about women in engineering, and what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, what can we do differently, and second, how does COVID provide something interesting, especially for women, to rediscover themselves in the civil arena. So on point one, honestly, I don't feel any difference whatsoever, except talent determining who does what. So it's never been an issue on gender that I've looked at. But interestingly, I've grappled with this problem across the global arena, whether I was working with aerospace firms, civil firms, construction firms, transportation. We saw a lot of women, very smart engineers with computer science background, with electrical and electronics background, gold medalists as chartered accountants, MBAs, very smart maths, statistical knowledge inputs. And we wondered, of course, why we have less of women in civil, mechanical, and mining. And of course, if you have the traditional answer, the thought is about, challenging work environment. So therein lies a big question. As leaders, what are we doing differently to enable a work environment that attracts the right talent and allows a culture and perception in a way that it gives an even playing field to our women colleagues in engineering? Of course, at the same time, diversity also allows innovation, new idea generations, debates and discussions. And we engineers that belong to an iterative science, the best designs come out because of multiple discussion, debates, and iterations. So while on this day of 15th September, we have the Engineers Day, I'm happy to also share with you all, this is the first time that UNESCO has recognized World Engineers Day, and it was held on 4th March 2020 for the first time. It'll be an annual event. And the focus of this 4th March event would be the World Engineers Day is to focus on the SDGs. And therein comes sustainability, along with diversity, along with a very neutral, culturally attractive place for colleagues to work irrespective of any gender bias whatsoever. So up to leaders like us to demystify engineering, to enable a less hierarchical, more flat organization structure where youngsters can move up fast with ideas, especially in the digital era, and enable more creativity, more innovation, more idea incubation. We at Tata's, of course, have focused on this part from early days. Somebody mentioned about Mrs. Murthy. I mean, she was at Tata Motors as one of those bright engineers that Tata Motors had before she joined NRN at Infosys. And I was fortunate to work at Infosys for 10 years, spearheading the engineering practice. And both of them were absolute visionaries. But what has Tata's done from TCE or various of the Tata Group companies? Of course, we've also helped in terms of having flexi hours, 50% of GETs without any dilution of capabilities to attract from the colleges, going to women's only colleges, leadership development. If we have leadership roles, the first among equals, we prefer a women colleague for that role. Travel policies have been tweaked to make it more friendly for our women colleagues. Of course, second innings to many of our smart women colleagues who have had their family obligations and want to come back. So we've allowed and encouraged that across the various Tata Group companies. Mentors, role models are areas that we have really encouraged across all Tata Group companies. Each of the CEOs in the Tata Group carry a gender diversity target. At the highest level, we carry a target. My target is to go from 15% to 25% overall. And my target is 25% in across TC. But if I look at design, we are at 34%. But if I combine PMC, which is on site, it reduces to about 15 to 16%. So we are encouraging women to join at construction sites, at mining sites. And I'll give you an example how leadership can change this. We were doing a very interesting work for one of our large client, global client, and we were working across India on projects. I won't talk about it, but during the negotiation, the client wanted certain reductions. We didn't want to reduce our price. And eventually I met with the chairman of the company, and we agreed on a very innovative idea. We said, we won't reduce the price. We will not outsource any of the work. But for all the work on site, from store management to safety, to audits, to planning, to all aspects of audit across these projects, which was spanning 5 years, we would only have women candidates and fresh engineers. And he said, perfect. And you won't believe that leadership insight. We finished the project 20% ahead of time, made higher profits, had less number of issues at site. And I was happy to share there was no fatalities in those 5 years at the multiple sites. So, we could encourage this behavior right at the top with innovative ideas, including during sales negotiation, during discussions, getting GETs, and of course, getting women to feel empowered and part of this culture. Now, I'll come to the second part of COVID times. I think these are unprecedented times. Not only will COVID force countries to relook at their supply chains, but it will also force them to relook at their citizens' capabilities and expertise. I think the era of globalization has reached its peak, and we will start seeing localization. Atmanirbhar Bharat in India is one of those things which will promote a lot of thinking, a lot of innovation, and it's a great time for engineers without any bias on genders to really come forward. And why do I say? Because when you come out of this COVID times, it'll be infrastructure, manufacturing, and chemicals that will drive a lot of innovation, both for Atmanirbhar Bharat in India, and of course, whether it's UK and US, as they'll figure out how they need to rebalance their supply chain with the geopolitical environment they see across the globe. It has to be balanced. Gone are the days when we could look at buying cheap stuff at the expense of our citizens not finding jobs. So I think there'll be a rebalancing of all of this. And so post-COVID times, it'll also mean less paper or paperless sites, more standardized and modular working. And I think this is where the civil engineers will have to start thinking like mechanical engineers, as mechanical engineers are thinking like chemical engineers, because in automotive, there aren't any engines left. It's all lithium batteries, it's all electrical motors. So as mechanical engineers learn to become chemical and electrical engineers, in infrastructure, civil engineers will have to think with BIM, modular and standard way of working, closer design and PMC integration, paperless office, AR, VR, to look at innovative construction techniques, all the stuff we talked about, precast, 3D printing, civil 3D printing, including new materials for innovative construction, such that we embrace sustainability, we embrace circular economy, and we embrace a more greener tomorrow. I think it is up for humanity to learn from COVID that we are responsible for these events. We better wake up and create a better, sustainable, and green tomorrow by respecting nature. And who else other than the civil engineers and our women engineers who can spearhead this change, this rethinking to create a sustainable and better tomorrow? With this in mind, I'll just say that it's the best time for engineers. There is disruption across all value chains. Steel is reconsidering changing coal to hydrogen. Automotive is reconsidering internal combustion engine to electric vehicles, lithium-ion batteries, as well as hydrogen. Civil engineers are looking at 3D printing of civil structures, a modular approach to construction techniques, better material that's recyclable. And I think amidst this transformation, disruption is the right time for our creative, budding engineers and women to come forward and make a mark. And there have been great engineers in past who've done that, but I would encourage women to feel very confident and proud to be part of this transformational era with Industry 4.0, post-COVID, and a balancing of supply chains as well as globalization turning into localization in a balanced manner. With that in mind, again, I'd like to thank you all for giving me an opportunity to share some of my thoughts. We could probably now go on to the much awaited announcements. I see these logos have been creatively thought of, put in a lot of efforts and thought process behind it, and it wouldn't do justice without listening to each one of you as to how you came up with the design. But I'm sure the judges have taken up upon themselves to the difficult part, and I will do the simple part to just say the names. So Rajesh and Yuvrani,
Yep.
you want to project some slides and I take the names, or should I take
No,
the
you will announce the third place first, and
Okay.
then we will project it, and then so it goes on like that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So first of all, congratulations to all the participants of you all putting in your creative hat and doing your best. Each of you are winners, and it must have been a very difficult task for the judges. But as we all know, there is an announcement that I have to do. So the third place goes to Manasa TS, Sapna Jasrotia, and Tipu Sultan. Congratulations. The second place goes to Abhijit Bhamare. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
And the winning team, Jyotirmoy Das Rabha, Shraddha Bhuvaka, and Rahul Rabha. Congratulations.
Thanks, Amit. Thanks for sharing the great ideas and inspiring us. This would really help us in for our future initiatives. Actually, thank you so much. With that note, I would like to congratulate and a huge round of applause to all the winners. And we would like to thank all the participants for the overwhelming response and creativity demonstrated. Uh, we would like to mention that the winner did a splendid job and won unanimously. The logo is not just any logo, it is a conceptual symbol of women in engineering presented with a well thought out description and variants. So, this is the logo concept which the winner has given, and I'm really I'm awestruck, like I'm so much impressed with the concept which they have given. I really want to read out that the logo depicts how women can become an achiever and leader in this profession of engineering. The three women depicts the collaboration and enhance gender diversity in the field of engineering and share their expertise and experience. Each woman is a support for the other woman and a mentor support to the young women engineers to inspire and develop leadership. Uh, Congratulations, winner. You did a very good job. Thank you for that and congratulations. I would like to announce here that the prizes will be distributed to the winners and we will connect to you separately through mail. Now, I would request Niveda to propose the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everybody. This is Niveda. I'm currently studying in 5th semester civil engineering, and I'm also a student member of ICE. Ladies and gentlemen, for the wonderful time we have all spent here together over the past 1 hour, which has been so enriching and knowledgeable, it is our duty to express our gratitude and extend our heartfelt thanks to all those people who have made this possible. I'm honored and lucky to have the opportunity to give a vote of thanks on this momentous evening. Firstly, I would like to thank all the speakers, Ms. Geeta Ramamurthy, Dr. Barnali Ghosh, and Mr. Amit Sharma for sparing their valuable time with us this evening. I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Mr. Ajit Savadi, Ms. Vidya Basarkod, Mr. Abhijit Kulkarni, and Mr. Ainanshu Dey for your significant dedication, patience, and knowledge to judge the logo posters. Also, my big thanks to the partnering organizations. A big thank you to all the participants of the logo competition. You all deserve a kudos for your great work and enormous efforts. Sincere thanks to the HR, Ms. Nisha from Mott MacDonald, and Atkins for extending their tremendous support for the logo competition. Special mention to the IC committee in UK, Patrick Courtney, Billy Martin, Catherine Cole, Thomas, and Ingrid Farmer who have supported all our initiatives. I'll be failing in my duty if I don't thank the IC representatives of India, Mr. Rajesh Patwardhan, Mumbai, Mr. Satish Saheta, Delhi, Mrs. Smita Sodatkar, Bangalore, Mr. Ainanshu Dey, Kolkata, and Mr. Balasubramaniam from Chennai. I'm so thankful to all the volunteers and steering committee members. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by such an amazing team who are motivating and dedicating. I'm also grateful to all the audience who have participated with constant encouragement and for those productive discussions, and also dazzled us with those light questions. Thank you, each and every one of you, for making this event a grand success. Thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you all.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Amit. Yeah, thanks, Geeta. Bye bye. Thanks a lot,
Bye.
guys.
Bye.
Bye bye.